Good afternoon, Elder Justice Warriors. It is wonderful to have you back with us on this April day. My name's Nicole Howell. I'm the Executive Director for Empowered Aging and a 21-22 Health and Aging Policy Fellow. I am excited to get to learn along with you today. Let's go through just a few reminders about our program in that we depend on you. This is an interactive session. So I want to encourage you to type your questions in either the chat or the Q&A. And a way to get started is right now, go ahead and drop in the chat your name and maybe what you do in the elder justice framework and why this topic is of interest to you. Of course, we also have closed captioning enabled. You can access that by selecting it on your toolbar. And we also have an ASL interpreters provided by California Department of Social Services. As a reminder, we meet here every Thursday, the third Thursday of every month from 12 to 1. We are going to be taking a pause next month. We'll be back in June for World Elder Abuse Prevention Awareness Day. As a reminder, we would not be here without our generous sponsors such as Kaiser Permanente, the Archstone Foundation, and John Muir Health. And of course, our planning partner, California Department of Social Services. It's also a great time now to start marking your calendars for June, which again is World Elder Abuse Prevention Awareness Month, and talking about what you're going to do in your community to commemorate this important day. Now, we've had a lot of conversations over the last 2 years of this webinar series, and something we've always sort of come back to is the challenging aspect of when an individual who's experienced a crime does not have a place that they can live safely. And I'm really excited today because we have Joy Solomon, the director and managing attorney of the Weinberg Center, who's going to talk to us about their model for housing older adults who have been the victim of abuse and neglect. And I think this is something that we can all adapt and learn from and hopefully implement in our communities. So with that, I turn it over to Joy. Joy, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I was thrilled to be asked and looking forward to this conversation. I saw that one of your sponsors is the John Muir Health Services, and I think one of my favorite quotes of all time was, John Muir said, if you tug on one thing, you learn that it's connected to everything else. And I think that's really true in the world of elder justice, that we are all part of something much larger. And really, that is actually how I see shelter, as really part of a coordinated community response. But we're all, we're all in this together, and it's really filling in these gaps of service and doing our own work that I think really creates wholeness and support for people who have experienced elder abuse. Next slide. So the Weinberg Center is a shelter for older adults who have experienced elder abuse. It is integrated into the campus of the Heber Home at Riverdale, which is a skilled nursing facility that's about 103 years old. When I started the shelter back in 2004, we were 880 beds. We are a little bit below 600 bed now, nonprofit, non-sectarian, long-term care facility on 32 acres in Riverdale, which is in the Bronx in New York. We are located on the Hudson River. It's a really beautiful campus where we are. And the Heber Home at Riverdale is actually, and the Weinberg Center are part of a larger healthcare system now called River Spring Living. And River Spring Living includes independent living, housing with services for older adults, assisted living, both Medicaid and private pay assisted living, 202 low income housing in the community. It also includes, we care for about 18,000 New Yorkers, low income New Yorkers who are on Medicaid in the community. So we are a very large system, and the Weinberg Center is part of the program on the main campus. The Weinberg Center for Elder Justice is an interdisciplinary, we have an interdisciplinary team consisting of lawyers and social workers, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And what's great about this model, and what I'm hoping I can help you do and understand, is that the model is flexible and designed to support your community, your resources, your needs. We created this without any bricks and mortar. I came as an attorney into the nursing home with the idea of shelter here. We were able to get foundation support for the first 3 years that we started. And so the shelter itself is integrated into our skilled nursing home. And it's actually virtual in nature. So if you came for a visit, I would take you on a tour of the whole campus. The clients that come into the Weinberg Center are placed here in what we call neighborhoods. In a hospital, it might be called a unit, but what we call a neighborhood, our clients are placed in neighborhoods that support the medical needs of our clients, and my team works with them wherever they are on campus. The 5 pillars of our work, and we'll go through this a little bit during this, my chance to talk to you, is shelter, replication, which includes the Spring Alliance, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but that's our national initiative to help others create shelter in their community. Legal initiatives, because I started the program and I am an attorney. I was a Manhattan DA for a little over 8 years, and then worked in a civil legal service agency. And the CEO here of River Spring Living is also a lawyer. We are a little bit what I call legal heavy. We prioritize particularly the civil legal system and the way in which we can support our clients, and really do a lot of work on trauma-informed legal services training and outreach, which really is part of number 4. So that is a really important part of what we do to help people understand about elder justice and its many facets, both to professionals and traditional and non-traditional people. And the last pillar of our work, of course, is the importance of partnerships. And again, that ranges from our DA's offices, law enforcement, to non-traditional partners like the doormen in New York City, who we've had a longstanding relationship with. Next slide, please. Okay, so the elements that I see that we've identified as necessary for shelter, and again, we'll go into this a little more deeply as we get through this, is a champion. The words that we often use here are, who owns this project? I'm a huge fan of trying new things, of failing so we can do a lot of learning, of succeeding. But I find that it's really useful and important to have one person who really kind of the buck stops with them. And we've seen that this is true for shelter too. Lots of people say we really need a shelter in our community. And I think it's critical for success to have a person or a person within an particular agency who's identified as the person who's leading the charge. Of course, appropriate housing is necessary, and that may mean affiliation with skilled nursing, assisted living, a suite of hotels or other foster care settings, anything that may be appropriate for the client or clients that you're serving. We are not in this alone. My goal when I started this program was to fill a gap in service, not to do anything that anyone else was doing. We had some amazing things happening around us, but this was a significant gap of service. And we need a network for all of us to really succeed in this work. Awareness about aging, ageism, elder abuse. You know, we really need to have that kind of awareness in order for shelter to be a success in a community. And of course, reliable funding. You know, obviously this is a critical piece in the creation and sustaining of shelter. And I think our communities and certainly the federal government who are starting to really pay attention to shelter. We have a federal grant now, really need to be stepping up a little more to help fill this critical gap in service. Next slide, please. So the way that we designed the shelter initially was that our program was affiliated with one long-term care facility. We are nestled in the Heber home and in River Spring Living. And when I started the program back in 2004 and started to get calls, how can we do this in our community? What really came to light was, you know, everybody doesn't have at the time, 880 bed skilled nursing facility, you know, willing to take these kind of cases. So what we realized was we really needed this model to be flexible and adaptable because different communities have different resources and needs, whether it's urban or rural. And so we share certain goals and values as the Spring Alliance and a shelter program, but everybody should create the shelter in their community that meets the needs of their community. So our model is similar to Model 1. Model 2 is a program like we have in Colorado Springs in the Pikes Peak region, where there is an external shelter program. They have an elder justice program there, coordinating placement at various housing sites with whom they have relationships. Sometimes it's through MOUs or contracts. And we've seen Model 2 used in many ways, where that bottom gray circle is a legal service agency. That bottom gray circle may be a Jewish agency that's providing community service. So that's happening a lot across the country. And Model 3 is, other models might be one like in the state of Utah, where APS has really taken a leadership role in creating systems of shelter across the state. So they're basing their model on various community needs and resources. Next slide, please. So the way our model works, and again, this is just what we're doing, is we will get a referral from, and there'll be a slide that comes where we show the list of all the referrals. And my team will make a decision based on information we're getting from the referral agency. We may do some follow-up work to determine whether this person is appropriate for admission, and we're going to go over the criteria momentarily. Once they make a decision that the person is appropriate for admission, and we've worked with our admission department to make sure that they're placed in a neighborhood that supports their medical care. Certainly in the last 2 years, there's some COVID regulations around that, but we've been able to admit people certainly in the last 2 years. Once they're admitted and placed in a neighborhood, they will receive an assessment like any other person who comes into our skilled nursing home. Medical assessment, case management, everything. They will have a doctor, everything that the people, anyone who comes here will get. They will receive, they will have a social worker on their floor that's part of the regular care team. And in addition, they will receive trauma-informed social and legal services from members of the Weinberg team. So those are all the services that they need around the abuse and the impact of abuse. And our goal from admission to discharge is really determining what is it that this client wants, where do they want to go, and can we make that happen for them? So right away, we're thinking about how can we discharge them into a safe place. Next slide, please. So these are the general criteria that we have for admission. The older adult must be 60 years of age plus. It's been rare, but it has happened where a person may be 58 or 59, and that's their chronological age, but because of comorbidities or other significant medical problems, that they may be really appropriate for the kind of services we can provide in skilled nursing. But remembering that the average age here is 89, we do tend not to admit anyone under the age of 60. The person must be experiencing one or more type of abuse or is at serious risk of abuse. We do not take referrals from family members or older adults themselves. We only take professional referrals. And so if a non-professional makes that call, we will have them reach out to either an agency or law enforcement or someone else who can do some of that initial vetting, make sure that this is really what's happening, and then have that professional make the referral to us. The person must be in need of shelter and agree or have their guardian agree that they can be here, brought to the Weinberg Center. And we have an initial 2-week no visitation period where there's no contact with really anyone. On occasion, we make exceptions if there's a family member who has lives far away or has not really known about what was going on. But generally, we do have a 2-week no visitation policy to really let our client start to feel a little bit of safety, start to understand what is going on, and sometimes actually to determine maybe that there's more than one person who has caused harm. So those are our general criteria. Next slide, please. So you can click a little bit more. These are generally our referral sources. And you can see that this really covers the gamut of community-based agencies that are working with older people. And this list of referring agencies continues to grow, but these are generally where we're getting our referrals from. Next slide. So this is just so you can see from, I believe this was from 2021, kind of where our referrals are coming from. The majority that year were coming from hospital. Next was Adult Protective Service. We have had a long and really healthy and wonderful relationship with the New York City and Westchester County Adult Protective Service areas. That's our catchment area. So we have a lot of people in that catchment area. And you can see also social service agencies are also providing a lot of referral sources for us. And CVAP is Victims Assistance Program. So that's one of our through Safe Horizon, which is a victims assistance program. So this is where our referrals are coming from. Next slide. So of course, an important question is, how do we get paid? We will accept clients regardless of their ability to pay, but certainly if we can secure payment, we try. It makes sense that most people who need shelter are people that don't have anywhere else to go or resources to go somewhere else. Sometimes it's because they don't have access to resources that are theirs. But generally the payment sources that we have are coming from Medicaid and Medicare, insurance. We have a foundation grant right now that is helping to support a certain amount of shelter days. We got some money for that this year. So for example, someone without immigration status, who it's going to take a very long time for any payment to come, that foundation grant will help support their stay here. We do get some city, county, and federal funding currently. We have some private funders who support the program, and we do an annual legal breakfast to raise money for our legal team. Next slide, please. So the team, the Weinberg team, has really grown over the years. And again, it's different depending on how big your shelter is, what the work you're doing there is. But our team is an interdisciplinary team consisting of attorneys, licensed social workers. We've had a public health specialist for the last 3 years, which has been an amazing addition to our team, particularly around helping us use and collect data in a particular way. We have a case coordinator, and we're always having legal and social service interns who are coming with us on a pretty consistent basis, which has also been great. Next slide. So just in terms of the legal team, they are providing for our clients direct legal services in all the various courts. And in other shelters and other programs, you know, in the Spring Alliance, they may be outsourcing the legal work that clients need or partnering with others, but in our model, we are providing the legal service. We sit on multidisciplinary teams in all 5 boroughs of Manhattan. And we also run the Westchester County multidisciplinary team. Just geographically, Westchester County is right above New York City. And we also sit on a weekly basis in the Manhattan Family Justice Center. And the team is also providing extensive outreach and training with judges, attorneys, and service providers. This past year, we created an elder justice resource guide, which sits with every single judge across all of New York State. And we also became a CLE provider in this last year. We are the only CLE provider, particularly focused on elder justice. That's true in New York. I think it may actually be true in the country, but certainly in New York State. Next slide, please. We are fully integrated with the Hebrew Home. So all of our clients receive all of the service from all the clinical work. We work obviously very closely with our security team. Housekeeping plays an important role in making sure that our clients where they are is kept clean and that they get exactly what they need. We work with food service. Finance, of course, really supports our work. Development in terms of our grants and foundation work, and our therapeutic activity staff, which is really, I think, critical for our clients to begin the healing process when they come here. Next slide, please. Just so, give you a general sense of what's going on in these last 6 years. Since we started, we've provided over 190,000 days of shelter. And you can see, kind of the shift in the number of admissions. So in 2019, we had 17 admissions, 2020, during COVID-19, 2021, 4. And 2022 is blocked, but we've actually had 4 clients in 2022. And just, in terms of understanding how many people use shelter, just remembering that we serve all 5 boroughs of New York City, all older adults, and Westchester County. So it's important that people understand it's not like the shelter has thousands of people coming in every year. The people who really need shelter, who are willing to come to shelter, the number is relatively low. But for those that need it, I think that it's, it's life-saving. And certainly the work that we do around each individual, pretty laborious and intensive. Next slide, please. So the Spring Alliance is a network that we created, I think back in 2010. And I did this really because people were calling to see how they could create shelter. And I wanted to create a network where we could share everything that we've learned, develop a community around shelter, and really hope to kind of spread this movement. Anyone can be part of the Spring Alliance. We have monthly calls where we share successes and challenges. And then every year we host a symposium. For about 8 of the 10 years, we were going to different shelter sites so people could see different shelters. In the last 2 years, of course, we've not been able to do that. So we've been holding virtual symposium. We have our Spring Alliance symposium next week, again for 2022, and really hopeful that in 2023 we can find our way back out to a shelter site. Next slide, please. Just this year or last year, the RAND Corporation did an initial evaluation of the Weinberg model. It was supported by the Hartford Foundation and the Weinberg Foundation. And RAND's result of that shelter model was that that initial evaluation was that the model has huge potential for cost savings. You know, essentially that there is a significant cost when people don't have shelter as an intervention because they continue to use systems, use emergency rooms, APS, ambulance, police, and other interventions that don't really stop the cycle of violence, but that having shelter as an intervention really holds potential promise. So right now, the RAND Corporation is working with the National Institutes of Health to come up with a longer range and more detailed evaluation, which we are hoping we will get started in 2023 or early 2024. Next slide, please. We also were thrilled and terrified to receive the Administration on Community Living Innovation Grant this year. And basically, with those 5 Spring Alliance members that you see at the bottom of the slide, we are working to show that clients who come into these shelters, including the Weinberg Center, who are APS involved because of the shelter intervention, will be connected with services upon discharge so that they no longer need APS involvement. And again, this is our way of beginning really to show and demonstrate that the shelter as an intervention is really critical, not only financially, but also in particular for clients who have been APS involved for a long time, that they are safe and, you know, stable in other services upon discharge. So that grant will end in 2023. Next slide, please. Okay, I think I got it right in under the mark. So happy to take any questions.
And we have a lot of them. Thank you, Joy, for going over that. I appreciate it. Want to encourage everyone to drop your questions or thoughts or reflections in the chat or the Q&A. I know that this is something that we all deal with in our communities, and so I'm sure we should have lots of them. You know, Joy, I just wanted to start out with my first job in the nonprofit community was for a shelter that worked with families who were experiencing homelessness. And so for me, this issue resonates and has a lot of thread through services for older adults. I think what I've learned is that it's not just about home, it's about the inability to rest. That our older adults who are either homeless or who are in abusive situations, they are never able to turn off. They are always on guard, and they sometimes have had a lifetime of struggle, and so can really be kind of armed up against their service providers who really want to help them. So my first question, as you said, you were very clear, this is a collaborative, cooperative model. And so how is it that you get your clients to agree to come to this facility? I would think that there might be some really negative connotations. So what's kind of your process around that?
I think that, you know, it's a great question and pretty multifaceted. I think there is some resistance, and part of that has been made worse through COVID. I think part of it is somewhat unfair. And like anything, I think there are amazing skilled nursing homes in this country and are much needed. And there are ones that aren't so great and really need to either be shut down or to be supported. So I think that is something that might make an older adult who is in need of shelter say, oh, do I really want to go there? Part of what we do is explain that this is temporary, that what we can provide is this holistic support, wraparound services. So when you come here, actually, I think rest is so critical. It's part of the first step in healing, that we're going to take care of your food and you're going to get food preferences. We're going to take care of your OT and PT if you need that. You're just going to go downstairs or someone's going to come get you. Your doctor, like everything's going to be here for you in an environment where there's lots of other older adults and the professional staff is trained. And many of them really like working with older people. So it's a really different kind of environment. And the goal is, and we start talking about this right away, is what do you want? What would you like to see happen? And for many people, that's I want, the person that's causing me harm, usually a family member, to get out of my apartment so I can go home safely, right? Or my apartment has been destroyed by my friend who moved in and is a hoarder. And so what we say is, when you spend time here, we're going to work with you in a trauma-informed kind of holistic way, and be really taken care of and working with community-based partners to get that apartment ready for you. Or you can stay here until we find you a different apartment if that apartment wasn't yours or not available anymore. Or for some people, actually, who have not really had access to healthcare or medical systems, say, maybe I need skilled nursing. Maybe this is where I need to be, in a place where actually I'm going to be taken care of and my medical needs taken care of, in a community of people that's kind of, more similarly situated to me than where I was before. So our goal is really, client directed. What do these clients want, and how can we help that happen? And some people say, I'm not going there because it's a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's up to them, so I get that can be a barrier, and sometimes we overcome that in a really great way.
Mm-hmm. That was what I was thinking is do any clients get there and then decide, oh, this maybe really is the best place for me. I'm getting the care I need, I'm getting support, and folks choose to stay within the
Yes.
facility?
Yes, and that's something that's always available to them. The rules and regulations have changed considerably in my almost 20 years here. We used to bring, at the beginning, when we started, people of all levels of care were coming, really even people who didn't need much care. And those regulations have really tightened. So sometimes it is challenging for us to take people who don't have any skilled needs. So we may take them into shelter for a limited time and maybe not get paid for them because they need the intervention, they need a safe place to go. And those people might not have skilled nursing as a long-term discharge. But for other people, they may want to stay here, or maybe they came from Brooklyn and they really want to go back. And so we try to find skilled nursing for them there if that's what they're choosing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and you said you had about 190,000 of sheltered nights provided. Essentially, what was the average length of stay? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah. So our average length of stay is from about 2 months to like 8 or 9 months. The
Mm-hmm.
longer stays are really about finding housing. That's really often the challenge, or because of delays in the court system, which prevent the person from getting there. That number of shelter days includes clients who have come and been discharged and clients. I think we have one client who's been here for 9 years. So she may still need some Weinberg support, or we're still doing some things for her. So we're including that count in the number of shelter days we've provided.
We've got some good questions from our community here. And, we heard so much during the pandemic about the rates of violence in the home against children, against interpersonal violence was really going up. But it sort of maybe looked like from your data that maybe the demand went down during COVID. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or do you think it's just a kind of a lag, or maybe there are fewer people interacting with the healthcare system?
I don't think demand went down. What happened, I mean, we were declared essential healthcare workers. So my team has been showing up every day since COVID started. It wasn't lack of demand. It was that so many services shut down. So older people were not necessarily able to get to service providers. I'm sure many of you guys experienced that there wasn't a safe way to communicate with service providers. So we did a lot of training. The team did on like telephonic or computer, teaching people how to make a signal if something's going on. Everybody had to do so much pivoting. And also, really because of COVID for that, those first 6 to 9 months where we didn't know how was the virus transmitted, we were having difficulty, the discharges from hospitals got very, very complicated. So a lot of that was just really around being in healthcare. But I don't believe that it was because these numbers went down. I am sure that more people experienced harm and abuse and neglect in the last year, older people, than we can even begin to imagine.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
One of our APS colleagues here asked, what about do you ever get clients that haven't been the victim of abuse, but have been maybe self-neglecting or hoarding, and they receive eviction notices? Do you work with those kind of clients, or have any reflections about how APS and other service providers could provide emergency housing for them?
Yeah, it's tricky. We've been pretty consistent in our work to say we are going to fill this gap in service, and we hope we can do 100% for those people, but this is what we are not going to be. One of the things was not to become a homeless shelter. One of the things was kind of recognizing that hoarding is often a psychiatric issue, not necessarily, maybe related to abuse, but not necessarily about current abuse. And when you bring someone, a known person who's known to be a hoarder, into skilled nursing, that person can be very, very problematic for the neighborhood, because it is such a difficult psychiatric condition. So we do tend to not accept people who are identified as hoarders. So we have, I want to say, we recognize that there's some significant things that we can't do. And, but I can't apologize for that's not within the framework of what we're trying to do. We are part of a much larger healthcare system. So we do have to be mindful, of who's here and how we're regulated and what we can do. So I know it's a really big problem, and but we have made a decision about those clients in particular. And again, with self-neglect too, I think there's some really interesting research that self-neglect may be a symptom or reaction of long-term mistreatment or abuse. And that might be right. But it's not something that we feel like we can necessarily resolve or solve or make better in our program. So we tend not to see those people as part of who we accept in our program. And it's not to say that those people aren't here as residents in skilled nursing, because they all are.
Right. One of the things we've noticed about clients who, are the victims of abuse is that oftentimes as we are trying to care for them and provide supports to them, they'll disclose other traumas from much earlier in their lives. Like, well, I also had that sexual assault, that I never told anyone about, or this happened. And we'll notice that that it begins to come out. So do you have that within your scope of some of the folks you work with, and how do you handle that?
We do. I mean, I have to say, as kind of, probably for many of us, the deepening understanding of trauma
Mhm.
is waking us up
Mhm.
to so many things. I mean, I think about when I was a prosecutor back in the 90s, and I would, say to a victim, come in my office, I'm going to close the door, it's secret, like
Mhm.
no good trauma informed practice I was doing, sit there, and how different I would do that now. But yes, people, our social work team, they are so skilled, and they do stuff does start to unravel. Stories start to come open and out about um, layers and layers of abuse over a lifetime. And failures of systems. We see a lot of mothers with adult children where there was so much failure in the systems that these women, these mothers, were really left all alone with a often mentally ill child or drug addicted child, and there were no systems that could support them. And you see that their marital relationship often, that there were some things going on there
Mhm.
too. And so yes, we do see that a lot. And I think, part of the work is listening, meeting people where they are, starting to, create safe space where people can talk about what has happened. And it's difficult for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we do have that's kind of amazing that I've not had in any of my other legal work is the chance to really be with clients for a long
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
So we do see a healing process. Not every time. I don't want to make it, paint
Mhm.
some rosy picture, but I have seen people come in here, flat affect, no ability to communicate, no connectivity. I'm not interested, to becoming fully engaged in this community. And they feel safe here. They start to trust a social worker that they see every day.
Yeah.
Maybe they're here for a year. So relationships um, happen. And what's interesting is sometimes they want to go back to the community. And some of the work and discharge is, you need to remember, when you go back in the community, you got to buy your own food. Like,
Mhm.
it's not what you've had here.
Mhm.
And so we do have a transitional bridge program now where we really help clients for up to 120 days to settle back into community, because we see that transition has been difficult sometimes.
So you're telling me that adulting is hard for a lot of people, not just me to go grocery shopping? Like other people struggle with that also?
Exactly.
I
Yep.
love to hear that. Adulting is hard all around.
Yeah.
So I want to get back. I want to talk about that aftercare piece, that bridge program. But before we do, can you chat about the licensing requirements that are applied to your facility? You talked about that a little bit of it. Is it a shelter, a skilled nursing? How do you walk that path? And then adding on to that, when you think of funding source and allocations, is some of your allocation coming around like the healthcare piece, then some of sort of the room and board piece? Like how do you work that out?
So I have to say, I mean, I think one of the keys to our success is a CEO who is all about this. This is his legacy. He identifies this as one of his legacy projects, and he's like, let's do this. We're in the business of taking care of older people. Let's just do this. So we
Mhm.
didn't get a special license for shelter. We're taking people very much like people they had already been taking in as residents in skilled nursing. I mean, there have been elder abuse victims in skilled nursing for forever, right? And there are abusers coming to visit and making healthcare decisions for them. So We did not seek special license to establish the shelter. In terms of payment sources, if the client, and I know California is different than New York, but for us, if the client is eligible for Medicaid, if they're not already on Medicaid, we will help them apply for Medicaid. So we will get coverage, some coverage for their stay here because of Medicaid or Medicare, or if they're in a managed long-term care program. That's New York based. The hiring our lawyers and our social workers and what we need for the Weinberg program in particular is where we have sought additional funding, because that's just not part of, the traditional nursing home stay. So that's where we sought extra funding. But what we found as other Spring Alliance members come is communities are interested in helping to support this program. The first thing is bringing awareness to communities about the problem, and that here's a solution that we think might work. And so it is of interest to funders. It's just not enough, but it is of interest to people because it is a problem.
I think you are really walking that line of like medical legal partnership. We're not used to seeing it in this way, but that really is what you're doing. I have a colleague who leads legal assistance for seniors here, and he's an attorney, but he was a social worker before that. And he says, I've rarely seen a client who doesn't also need a social worker. So,
100%.
yeah, we need them both, right? And you have them under the same roof, then they can trust them. That's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I appreciate that you said that. Yes, I see us as a medical legal partnership. I mean, it's like, our clients that come here, they get a legal checkup. And so much of when we do that legal checkup, they haven't taken care of anything. I mean, another thing that's like we've done in the last few years that has been so meaningful for me personally is end of life decisions, right? So a lot of our clients, particularly around COVID, maybe if they had a healthcare proxy, that person is their abuser. So we really want to make sure that the person making these decisions really cares about them, that they can trust them. And sometimes when they have guardians, the guardian's like, that's out of that's more than I can do. And we have really pushed the court to insist that the guardians need to be figuring out either with the client or through other means, what might this client want, because there are end of life decisions that can be very painful, and we want them to be having these discussions. So, we've done some great advocacy around that to make sure that clients have the kind of end of life plan that they want.
You are so right. We did some work and we did some surveying of folks. We brought in attorneys and to do that work in assisted living facilities. And what we got, the response was, I didn't know how to start, or it seemed ominous. But once they understand that they have an attorney that they can trust, that only wants what they want, and that they can get to control those last days, weeks, or months of life, it's really, I think, a returning of authority to someone who's been victimized.
I think so too. I mean, it is about giving agency to people who, to your earlier point, have often never had agency in their life, So that's, kind of an amazing thing to see. Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk for a few minutes about that bridge program, because I think what you've identified is you don't simply become well. Everyone needs a little bit of support launching back into life. Tell us about that bridge period of time and what those services look like.
So it actually started with my social worker probably, 5 or 6 years ago saying, we queue this discharge up so well. We've connected them to every service in the community. And then they start calling me, 2 weeks after they're gone. I need this, I need that, and then they fall through the cracks, or the abuser comes back or something like that, but they don't have the capacity or the facility really to just kind of maintain all the stuff that they've learned. So she really pushed, to her credit, that we need something on the other side when clients are discharged, because once they're discharged, they're not our clients anymore. That really helps these clients reintegrate back into, as you called it, adulting. And and so that's what that does. We have a social worker who upon discharge meets the clients, visits them. I think it's 2 times a week that she sees them, helps connects them to services,
Right.
make sure that they're doing what they need to do. Are there any concerns? Things like that, where it's a trusted touch point. And she works with us in case some things aren't going well, if there's orders of protection, maybe where there might be some violations or, whatever. And again, it's up to 120 days. So, no, up to 90 days, I'm sorry. To 120 is our current grant. So we find that 3 months is really, has been very helpful. And yeah, so that's why we did it, and that's why we do it.
Thank you. Before we sign off, I have one other question for you, and it's a little not so much Weinberg Center related, but sort of your other work. The whole of your title is, Vice President of Elder Justice and Spiritual Engagement. And I know you have an active practice in that area. And so I'm curious, what is it that you do that helps to bring you calm and peace amid what can be a chaotic working environment with lots of hard stories? So
Oh,
how do you
thanks.
use that other part of your brain?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, on the last, since I've been here, I've gotten certification as a yoga teacher, and I just finished a 2-year program with Jack Cornfield as a mindfulness teacher. And so part of my work here is also, I lead a meditation 2 days a week here at work. I'm a firm believer in moving the body and moving the breath. And in the last 2 years, also reading a little bit of poetry every day. That has really been a good grounder for me. So part of my work here as Vice President of Spiritual Engagement is really thinking about how our staff, who's been through so much, can reassert their sense of purpose and meaning at work here. Around twilight of people's life, death and dying, COVID, healthcare, to really support them. So that's my practice.
That's beautiful. Well, I hope that will be inspiration for all of us if we've been putting off that self-care and in some sort of regular practice caring for ourselves, that is a call to really come back to that place. And that's how we can best serve our clients. Everybody, as I said, we're going to be taking off next month. We'll be back in June to commemorate World Elder Abuse and Awareness Day. Joy, I want to thank you for all of your work and for sharing it here with us in the community. I want to remind everyone that we will be sending out a recording of today's presentation along with the slides early next week, so look out for that. And go back out there and fight the good fight, guys. We'll see you again in June.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.